Welcome to this quick tip video. My name's Anne from Orchid Systems, and in this video I'm going to run through using SFTP to upload your EFT files to a remote server with EFT processing for Sage Intacct. To move or upload a file to a remote server using SFTP, you can either use an SFTP client or an SFTP server to auto-transfer files from a local drive to a remote server/drive combination, or you can use a tool to map the remote server/drive combination to a local drive. The steps you need to do to transfer your EFT file created in Sage Intacct to a remote server would be to configure your browser for Sage Intacct to download the EFT file to a local drive, to a specific local drive. And to do this, we recommend you use a specific profile or a particular browser icon, so that your other downloads don't get inadvertently transferred to the SFTP server remote drive. And then you would use the SFTP client or SFTP server or your remote server mapping tool to then transfer the file from the local drive to the remote drive. If you're using an SFTP client or SFTP server, there are many open source, free or licensed tools, so depending on the IT standards and or the other FTP requirements that the client may have, you would choose the appropriate tool. The SFTP client or SFTP server keeps the credentials for the remote server and the protocols to use with that remote server. Examples of these are Win, SCP, FileZilla, CyberDuck, etc. But using a tool to map to a remote server/drive as a local drive, there are also many open source, free or licensed tools, including built into the local operating system. The tools themselves keep the credentials for the remote server. And on a Windows operating system, you can use WinFSP plus SSHFS/Win, and on a Mac OS operating system, you can use OS X Fuse and SSHFS for Macs. I'm going to show you an example mapping a remote server to a local drive. So in this example, on the left-hand side, you can see I have mapped my S drive to the FTP server 192.168.70.198, and I'm using WinFSP and SSHFS Win to do that mapping. So the files that you can see on the S drive, a local drive, are the same files that you see when you log on to the FTP server. The next thing you do is you change your browser downloads to a local drive. In my case, see Sage Intacct EFT files. But if you're working in a multi-user environment and multiple people need to SFTP the EFT files, this would be a UNC path. And then you have an automated process which moves the files from the configured directory, in my case C Sage Intacct EFT files, to the map drive S. And this is an example of a batch file which you can then schedule using the Windows Task Scheduler. So to see the steps that you need to do in action for this is, first you would configure a particular profile in your browser. So in this case, using Chrome, I've created a Sage Intacct profile, which would have the downloads directory configured to the appropriate drive. But you could use a completely separate browser that people only use for Sage Intacct. And then in the browser, in my case Chrome, I've set the location of the downloads to see Sage Intacct EFT files, and just for demonstration purposes in the first demonstration, I have left on ask where to save each file before downloading and show the downloads when they're done, so we can just confirm that it's gone to the appropriate directory. And then I would go into Intacct, download my EFT file, and here you can see I've downloaded can CPA today's date _6, and you can see the browser is prompting me to store it in C Sage Intacct EFT files, and after downloading I will then run the batch file to move everything from C Sage Intacct EFT files across to my S drive, which in turn has been mapped to the remote server and drive. And then you can see on my S drive, it has now moved that file can CPA today's date _6 to the S drive, which is indeed my SFTP server 192.168.70.198. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this for you. So in my Sage Intacct, the settings that I've done in my browser, which is Chrome, for the downloads, I have configured that the download files are going into the C Sage Intacct EFT files directory, and I have configured also to prompt before saving the files and show the files when they're done, just so it's very clear what's happening. So when I come to download an EFT file, EFT creates the file and names it accordingly. So this is my can CPA number 7. Because my browser says prompt before saving, I can see the file name and I can see it's going into the Sage Intacct EFT files directory. And when I click save, I see the folder where it's done. So if I go there and look, I can see that my can CPA number 7 is sitting in that directory. And now normally this process would be configured to run automatically, but I'm manually going to move from my C drive to the S drive. And now, when I go back to that directory, it is empty. But when I look at my S drive, I now see file number 7 sitting in that drive. And by removing some of those prompts in the browser, we can download the file, and if the process to move across is automated, you see the file is automatically transferred or moved, immediately moved to the SFTP server or remote server drive. I have just demonstrated transferring a file from a local drive to a remote host server/drive using WinFSP and SSHFS-Win. If you do want to use an SFTP client or an SFTP server instead to do the auto transfer, you need to do some research to make sure that the client or the server will automatically transfer and sync the folders, and not just only transfer it up when you log on and click synchronize. Thanks for your time. For more information on Orchid's EFT processing for Sage Intacct, please go to our website.